So I'd like to welcome my dear friend Ara Dinkjian, who has been coming here for a few years now. I think we met at the Woodstock showcase, Luthier showcase in 2011. That year, unfortunately, I didn't sell any ouds, but I met you. So that, for me, that was like worth the trip and the whole ordeal of bringing your instruments and all of that. So I welcome you. First of all, to Lord of the Strings, which you've been to, and this is a part of a series for Heritage Soundcraft Institute about luthiery. Welcome, my friend Ara.
Thank you, John. Actually, that meeting at 2011 at the Woodstock Luthier Showcase was good for me too. I certainly was not expecting to find an oud maker. It was all guitars and a lot of great guitar makers that were represented, but I was kind of shocked to find you. And even more shocked to find the quality of your instruments. Please forgive me if it's inappropriate to say, but you're not Middle Eastern, and yet you had a knowledge and a passion for the instrument and an obvious talent in making them. So it was great. It was great to meet you, and then we began. I'll tell you what happened.
Go ahead.
This is being honest now.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta check you out. So I came with a slight tiny little thing. I came to your shop here for the first time.
It was a crack in your ebony fretboard.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, luckily for me, it's like one of the easiest fixes.
Well,
but it's the one that impresses people.
Well, listen, I have a lot of ouds that need a lot of attention, but I didn't want to give you, without knowing you, some antique oud with a big restoration need.
Of course.
I had to check you out, and I remember my first impression was how your tools were lined up in a neat fashion, and for me that said something. Not that messy people are not talented, but I kind of saw that you were kind of organized and a little meticulous, and that for me that was a good sign. So I started with a little repair, which you did absolutely perfectly, and then gradually started giving you more and more detailed things, and now I'm your biggest fan.
I think what won you over is I did a restoration on a Kadamani oud. You had a beautiful Kadamani oud. Kadamani, actually one of my favorite makers. They were two Syrian brothers living in Istanbul, and they they're interesting because they not only made ouds, but they also did like Ottoman manuscripts they sold at their shop there. I prefer their work sometimes over in the hat and other makers. They didn't make many. After they died, that was it. There was actually three brothers. So I did a restoration for you, and it was an Arabic oud mainly, and you were looking to sell it when I was done. And you got this. It was a new soundboard, but I copied all the details. You sat down, you played, and you said, "How did you do it? Do you still have that oud?"
I absolutely have it. I actually, I'll tell you, I had seen that somebody was selling a hard case oud, a case for an oud, a hard case, for $100. So you could always use a good hard case. So I went to pick up the instrument. Some woman was selling it, and I opened the case to check out the size and the quality and all. And in it was this antique oud.
Wow.
And I said, let me take this out. She goes, "Oh, no, I don't want that thing. I said, "You mean the case comes with the oud?" She goes, "Oh, yeah, just take it." Okay.
Okay, that was a score.
So that's how I got the oud.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, but the oud, frankly, sounded terrible and had a lot of problems with it. And not that I know about these things, but I didn't think the oud had any potential. And I certainly didn't know the history of the makers. But as I said, I eventually gave you more and more detailed or complicated work. And when I brought that to you, you were excited to see that it was a Kadamani. You told me about the history, and then I started doing some research. Oh yeah, this is something. And again, I did not expect it because it had no tone, it had nothing. But it was at the point where the soundboard could not be salvaged.
Right.
So you took the dramatic step of putting a new soundboard on, which some people criticized you, I remember, on Facebook.
Oh, everywhere. Yeah.
Because you detailed the restoration. All I know is I can't imagine that oud sounded anywhere near as good as it does now when it was first made. That soundboard was something special.
So first of all, I go through great lengths to save stuff.
Right.
So if I had figured at that time that that soundboard was kaput, there's nothing left to it, it was really bad. And again, I copied all the details, so that's a restoration, and it's tough to do. It's a lot of work, but an instrument like that, I absolutely will, spend whatever energy and time necessary to do such a thing. Especially a name like Kadamani.
Yeah.
If you see the way they make their bowl, they have that beautiful curve.
Right, unique.
As much as I love Nahat and I try to copy their work all the time, actually Nahat never made a bowl like that.
Right.
And they also had very ornate work that would be up there with the Nahats.
Yeah.
But the difference is they just, after the brothers died, there were no sons or relatives to carry on tradition, so Nahat gets a lot of the hype.
Right.
Because it was a 100-year dynasty.
Right.
So.
But I also appreciated that you gave me the original soundboard back, so I keep them together, so that if and when I was to ever sell it, I would give that original soundboard, so that you have the history of the instrument.
Yep, it's all there.
Yeah.
So you're actually here today because you have a very interesting recording, and I like it a lot. It's full of rich improvisations. It's called Conversations with Manol. Because we're almost on the topic of Manol. We're talking about Kadamani, we mentioned Nahat. These are the great oud makers. And Manol, actually probably my favorite, up there with Kadamani and Nahat. Manol was a Greek maker, right? I didn't do my research right before this, but I know he died somewhere in the early 1920s, I believe. He was a part of that Ottoman Empire thing happening at the time. And I believe he lived in Istanbul. I also believe that one of his students, Oni Karibian, I believe is one of his students or apprentices, which I have one of his ouds here. You have a recording conversation with Manol, and in it you thank all luthiers. Now for me, I come in, I work every day, and I work very hard. And sometimes you don't exactly get appreciation from everybody. But every now and then you do, and you've always been someone who thanks me for being here, thanks me for doing the work I do. You've also encouraged my apprentice and my other apprentice in the past. So that's why you're here, and I know you have a unique perspective that I like to hear about, well, not just ouds in general, but it could be about instruments, so that's why you're here.
Well, I'm actually, I don't mean to criticize anybody, but I'm more surprised that luthiers have not gotten the appreciation that they should. Because we know that, number one, it's the ones on stage that get the attention, get the applause, get the money, get the accolades, the fame, what have you. Behind them would be the composers of the songs. They get, recognition and accolades, brilliant composer, okay. So there's this whole industry of music that the whole world participates in, and our lives are enhanced by music. It's actually, I believe, what keeps us human, what reminds us what it is to be human. Music is that thing that unites everybody. Political and historic enemies meet.
Play music together.
At music, exactly. It's a crucial part of existence to me. Where would any of that be without the person making the instrument? It starts there. And regarding that recording, first of all, when you hold an antique instrument, especially one that is made by a master, you have to wonder, and I always did, what if this instrument could talk to me, could tell me its history? Starting with the seed dropping from the tree and growing to a beautiful tree, and the guy cutting the tree down, bringing that wood to the shop, aging it or whatever it is they do, then starting to make an instrument. Now, somebody like Manol, that would not be an instrument for a child or for an amateur. It's a professional instrument. I'm sure even at that time it was for the professionals, or in some cases even for the sultans. So those instruments, what stages were they on? Who performed on them? What other instruments and musicians did it accompany? What countries did it travel to? I mean, if it could talk, it would be so rich, you know. And then the honor of being able to, I don't want to say possess it, because we're only the caretakers. We're not going to live forever. It should be then passed on to the next generation. But the story behind that recording, if I'm not talking too much,
No, please.
A dear friend of mine said, would you go and record some solo oud? I'm going to recite my poetry and I would just like some oud in the background. I said, oh, okay. I'll do that. Just at that time, my dear friend Oud Manukyan, who I had given that manol oud that I had just acquired, but it was unplayable, I had given it to him. He called me and said, oh, your manol oud is ready. I said, oh, that's perfect, because I'm going to the studio today, and, oh, what the hell, I'll take that one. Okay. So I took it, never having played it before. My friend, the engineer, said, so what are we doing? Because I'm always very prepared. I work for months before I do a recording. But this is the first time I said, actually, I have no idea what I'm going to play. I just need to have the sound of an oud so that somebody's going to recite poetry over it. Okay, so he set up 2 microphones, and he said, we're recording. And I started to play, but John, without being over dramatic, I swear I was more listening to the instrument as if it was telling me its story.
So did you just think about, maybe let me not play like Oud, but I'm going to play in a way that allows the instrument to take me where it wants to go?
That's the thing, I didn't think.
Because sometimes instruments will dictate
the
repertoire that you might want to play, a style that you might want to play. Like when I get your ouds in, they're Turkish.
Right.
Ouds, I tend to play more Turkish style.
Yeah,
I don't play that way on my Arabic instruments.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, it just really unfolded into these short pieces. Some of them were very abstract. Some of them sounded like melodies, like compositions, although they were absolutely spontaneous. Others sounded a little more like Taksim, but so help me, it just came out, and honest to God, I did not delete one note. I did not edit.
Was it all one take?
Everything is one take,
Oh,
and
wow.
whatever was on that CD is everything that I played. The only thing I changed was the sequence, just to kind of vary the thing. But I didn't edit or delete anything.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then my engineer friend said, "What was that?" I said, "What do you mean? What did you just play?" I said, I don't know. Whatever I played, it's for this girl that's going to recite." He says, "I think you should listen to this before you give it to anybody." I said, okay, you know. And I started to listen, and the first thing that hit me was the tone, the quality of the instrument sound. This is what I love about the oud. I feel the wood. I don't hear the pick. I don't hear the strings. I feel the wood.
It's a very organic sound, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
You know,
Earthy.
and there are times where you could hear me hit a bass note and I don't play anything else because you hear me enjoying the sound of this instrument.
Right.
And that's why I called it Conversations with Mono, although it was more me listening than me answering. But anyway, the end of the story is...
He did most of the talking.
He did most of the talking, right. The end of the story is my friend called and said, "Well, did you record it?" I said, "Yeah, but you can't have it." "What do you mean?" I said, "I think this is my next CD. I'm sorry, you know." So that's the story behind that. But yes, it is dedicated to luthiers, both of the past and of the present, among which you are certainly one of them.
Right. Yeah, you know, when I first got into this, it was like I wanted to make instruments. I love music and I love woodworking. I wanted to bring some beauty into the world, you know. And I didn't really think I was doing anything that profound. It turned out I was preserving culture, right? If you are making an oud, first of all, you're keeping it alive. If you are doing a restoration, you're certainly keeping something antique alive, right? And also if you teach, which I do, I teach courses on instrument making. I have apprenticeships. I'm certainly doing my part, which is I think I take very seriously to impart the knowledge to the next generation. I think that's very important.
Yeah, so what you do with your restorations is what I do with my own music. Meaning, before you move forward, and we do want to bring our respective arts forward. We're not museum
That's true.
pieces.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So, but before we do that, we have to make sure the foundation we're standing on is solid. Meaning,
you need the vocabulary.
you study Nahat.
Yes.
You study Manol.
Yeah.
What were their methods? I don't know. You would say it better than me. But to respect, and as you said before with the Kadamani, to try to retain what they did, to bring their instrument the sound that was intended.
Right.
Same thing with me. Before I write a song, I want to investigate the history of the makam or the form of the music, so that not that I copy it, but that I know where it's been, so then I could move a little forward.
Well, when I first started playing Arabic music, I was coming from flamenco, and I thought it would be a genius idea to mix the two. And when I started to learn more Arabic music, and I was studying with Simon Shaheen's camp, the retreat, I said, this would, to my opinion, it's a mistake that this music is so rich, you could spend a lifetime and still not have enough time to master it. And I understood the depth of it. And so it was important for me to learn the tradition as good as I could. And it's not my culture, but learn the tradition as good as I could, pass that on, and that would be my base. And I look at the same way for my oud making, my instrument making. The old guys knew what they were doing. Okay, and if you learn their recipe, you're learning good vocabulary. Now, you said something to me once. You said that when you compose, you want to be away from what the critics are looking for, something like this. You want to be the full freedom to compose something that is yours, that's you, rather than stick to the tradition 100%. You learn the tradition. You can play the tradition. You still play the tradition, but you are you, and you have this experience here, and we're in 2024, and so you have a modern take on things, right? Isn't that your case for your work?
Well, it's not just modern. It's the fact that I am an individual. That doesn't make me any more valuable or less valuable than anybody else. But before I die, the idea is to define your identity as a musician. Yes, we start by copying the ones we admire. We learn the tradition. But to me, my musical life would be worthless if all I accomplished was copying Udi Huran's Taksim or Yorgo's Taksim, which is in itself impossible, because that was of a time and of a place that no longer exists. And let's face it, those musicians that we admire, at the time that they were creating their new art, in many cases were belittled. Stravinsky, this is not music. Beethoven, what are you doing? This is all wrong. Yeah, now they're geniuses, It could be Ornette Coleman, it could be anybody, you name it. At the time they're doing something that hadn't been done. What is this? This is not... Well, this is who that person is.
Right.
You like it, you don't like it.
Yeah.
To me, the greatest compliment a musician could get is, after hearing them for 10 seconds, that's got to be Miles Davis. I hate the way Miles Davis plays. That's okay, but you know who it is.
Yeah, he has his distinct sound.
As opposed to... that's somebody trying to play like Louis Armstrong. Well, you haven't contributed to the art.
Now, one can find faults with the old masters. Say, well, did we do things better now? And, I can look at Nahat's work and say, okay, I wouldn't do it this way, the neck joint, for example, but even if I don't like Nahat, making oud, I'm copying some of their recipes, some of their proportions and things like that.
John, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Since I have this opportunity.
Go right, yeah.
To me, it must be such a humbling experience, because I've seen, for example, luthiers make a batch of ouds, let's say 4 at a time. The same molds, the same source of wood, the same maker, the same environment, everything the same.
Yeah.
4 different sounding ouds.
Totally different, yeah.
This has to be, and we've played monols that just don't have it.
Every maker says, I want to produce the best sounding oud, the next oud or guitar, whatever's they're making, but the instrument is full of surprises.
This is very humbling. I mean, as a musician, there are moments where you're inspired and you don't know how. Wow, I'm so grateful that came. And other times where your intentions are good, it's just not happening.
It's interesting. I've had this conversation with my mentor, with the oud, Najib Shaheen. Well, we'll get into because it ties into a gentleman used to visit for oud work. He told me his best sounds are created nonchalantly, just with no care. And I gotta say, there's something about that. Something about wanting, if you want too much the sound to be good when you're making the instrument, it kind of ruins it.
You're disappointed. Yeah.
You're disappointed, or just it kind of ruins something. If you do it, and you're in the moment, and you enjoy each process of gluing this thing and shaving this thing and just in it, those instruments for me tended out to sound the best out of all. So I try.
So interesting.
I try, and I mean, it's tough because I'm doing something right now. It's very beautiful, and when you put the extra time in for the ornamentations, of course you want the sound to go with it, right? That's the holy grail. But I try not to worry too much about the sound. Of course, I'm concerned about the sound. I do things, and I look at each piece of wood differently. I flex it. I say it's flexing more in the middle. So you try to approach it with some logic and understanding and experience. Okay, so then if it's flexing in the middle, I'll put the brace over here and make it a little thicker there, and I'll taper it that way. It's not totally random, and it's not totally fixed. You have to examine the situation.
Yeah. There's another element to ouds that we haven't really talked about, and I don't know the right terminology, but of course we've already talked about tone. The sound, meaning volume, balance of sound, sweetness, all of these things that total sound. Okay. Yeah. Of course, this is what we're all looking for. But then there's this other thing that the only word I could come up with is playability. Of course it means the shape of the neck, but if it was science, I could say, John, measure this oud because this has great playability for me. Give me exactly this. But that doesn't guarantee it's going to have that same playability. And this is what's so interesting. When some of my students ask, do you think I should buy this oud or not? I say, close your eyes. Don't look at the cosmetics. Don't look at the price. Close your eyes. Play that oud. If it makes you want to play, buy it.
So here's the deal. So this is what I figured out. If an instrument has all of those things going for it, the sound is there, the setup is right. The one thing everyone says is that it seems that it plays itself. That's what they say. Right. It plays itself. Right. It's effortless.
Right.
And that's ideal for the musician because they can put their time and energy into the music more instead of fighting the instrument.
Exactly.
Now there's also individual play. Some people are looking for a different sound, and when it comes to setup, everyone has different anatomy. And setup in itself is an art because I've had many cheap ouds come in, and it's crazy to say sometimes people put as much as $1,000 into an instrument they spent $200 on. Right. But I get right some of the wrongs, or the things that were rushed. The reason why it wasn't a $1,000 or $1,200 instrument is because they rushed the setup. Setup really takes a lot of time to get the fingerboard, the height just right, the height of the strings, the spacings of the strings, the spacings of the nut, how it corresponds with the bridge.
Exactly. So crucial.
And people want to measure the action all the time, but there's a few angles that kind of change that, so that measurement's not fixed. Sometimes it's you measure and it's high, but it feels comfortable. Right. Well, that's also because the sound is good. It's also the angle in the strings and the angle of the neck. So there's a few parameters there.
I love it.
But setup is an art, and it's an art that I think because I'm a bit of a player, I understand. I've listened to musicians. I've listened to you over the years. I've listened to Simon. Simon blew my mind. He came in and he played an oud that I had made. And the way he tests sometimes an oud, he tests the sound on one string alone. So he'll play a scale better than me, and he says, listen to how it sounds here to how it sounds there. He goes, this oud is not exactly the same. He said, that other oud you did for me, it connects beautifully. I never even thought of that. I knew that there's a sound we want to achieve up here. I never thought to connect that.
Right.
Simple thing.
But
the
how
player
would
needs
you
that.
do that?
Yeah, so it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, I can get technical.
No, I don't expect you to answer me,
Like
but-
in a 1 minute answer, sometimes there's 2 braces here only.
Right.
And then there's a block here. So from
Right.
here to here, there's a block. And there's a brace here and here. So what I learned, and this is something that Najib Shaheen does regularly, he puts 3 braces up here. Makes this area stronger. This area is basically acoustically dead, mostly. Most of your sound is from here. Okay? So if you add strength under here, and you have enough mass underneath, it actually helps the sound here project better.
That's very interesting. Wow.
And then if there's less material, if you put, let's just say no braces, I don't recommend that ever. It would be weak and wobbly up here.
So interesting. And I would have thought the opposite, but there you go.
We add more mass there.
Very interesting.
So which is counterintuitive, but if you think about it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Considering that area is dead, you can add material there.
Right,
you know.
right.
Yeah, these are some of the nuances that I think about. Here's another thing no one talks about, but the mood of the maker during the making process is actually very important. Now I'm leaving science a little bit. Now I'm getting to, I don't know what this is, mysticism, what it is, but it's certainly true. If I don't feel well, if I just don't feel right, or if I'm angry or upset, I actually tend to stay away from the making process because I don't want whatever that is to be absorbed into the
So
instrument.
interesting. Wow.
So I try it when I'm often inspired because this is, my opinion, the best job on the planet, you know. And I get in this flow state, this zone where I'm in a time, and I look at oh my God. And my apprentice said that. He goes, oh, it's 6 o'clock already? We just came in the morning. It's 6 o'clock. I said, that's when you're doing this type of work.
Yeah.
But when I used to work for IBM before my former life, and it's the opposite.
Watching the clock.
You look at, and the time's going backwards, right?
Yeah, right,
you know?
right.
So when I know that when I'm in that state and I'm working, I know I have something good. I know the sound will be good. I trust the sound to be right. For, you know. No one talks about that though.
That's very interesting, John.
Yeah. So take it back. So my mentor Najib Shaheen, he studied. Well, I think he was just hanging out with Eddie Berberian, and Eddie taught him. They used to get together, have some whiskey at night, and talk up in Washington Heights, Thayer Street. And so he had learned a great deal from Eddie, and I believe Eddie learned from a man named Tawfiq Ashar, which I've had a couple of ouds from Tawfiq. Tawfiq was a Syrian maker, very early in the United States. And I believe Eddie had learned from him. They were friends. Tawfiq having a shop somewhere in Brooklyn, Court Street, on the labels. I've seen a few. So Eddie's an interesting character. Eddie, well, for one, he did a lot of soundboards. He was kind of the guy, right, at the time.
He was the only one that we knew of.
And his son came out of that whole culture and he was big. Johnny
Barbarian, yeah.
Right, and I believe you studied with Johnny even, right?
I took a few lessons, but more than the lessons, because he wasn't really a teacher, I played with him, accompanied him for 30 years. So on stage and in concerts, I learned more just by observing.
Right.
Yeah, than any
So
formal lessons.
you were in the atmosphere, and Johnny's lucky to come from a place where he has ouds around him all the time. His father was like repairing them and doing soundboards. I know that Eddie. The funny thing about Eddie is that his shop was a dry cleaners, and this shop before you came, I said, "Oh my goodness, I had to vacuum, and I am always fighting dust." But to think that his shop was a dry cleaner, where people bringing tuxedos and suits and fancy blouses, whatever they wear, I can't imagine the dust storm. Like, I'm fighting dust constantly, you know. So it's just you can't think of it two worst business to butt up next to each other in the same location, you know.
But he was passionate about what he was doing.
Yeah.
I don't mean the dry cleaning.
Yeah, and I'm sure like anyone who does this work, and Najib talks about it too. He worked late into the night, and in that state of flow or bliss from the work is really beautiful. It's God's work. Really.
Right.
I'm sure Eddie experienced that, and that's why he did it.
Yeah.
He's not here to speak for it, but if he did a lot, that's why he did it.
Yeah, I went to him many times because, as I said, there was nobody else that we knew of, and the way I feel about you, I go back to Mr. Barbarian. We were lucky to have him. It's as simple as that. You're playing and suddenly there's a horrible buzz, and okay, we're not luthiers. We don't know what to do, and you need that instrument for your livelihood. So, again, how is it that luthiers have not gotten the recognition and appreciation they deserve? That's a mystery to me, but I'm certainly doing what I can about that.
Yeah, you have been you've always been very thankful. You even thank my apprentice for wanting. I said, you're thanking him for a life of poverty he chose for himself, which I warned him multiple times. Yeah. I said, "Are you sure? It's gonna be 10 years. You're gonna be eating peanuts." He said, "I want to do it." I said, "Let me test him," and I kind of, I didn't answer his email right away, and he got back to me. I said, "All right, he's serious."
Okay, all right, yeah, exactly.
Because I've had a lot of people ask me they want to learn, and you can't take on everybody, and everyone's not an ideal match.
Right.
But so it's interesting because so my teacher Najib, and then Eddie was his mentor, and how it continues, and I hope someday my apprentices will say, I got my start in John's shop, and this way, and it continues like that. I have a son who I don't know if I want to. I'm not going to force him. Okay, just like you didn't. I understand you didn't push music on your kids. If my son wants to learn instrument making, I'll help him the best I can.
Of course.
If he doesn't want to, I understand.
Yes, of course.
It's not for everybody.
Exactly.
So. But yeah, it is kind of a little bit choosing a life of poverty, although in later years, over time, I've been doing better. I think a few years ago, I matched my salary as an engineer at IBM. And I was like, looking at it, it's like, wow.
You did it.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
You
did it.
And that was during COVID, so, when things were tough.
Amazing.
Well, during that time, everyone decided they were going to be a virtuoso. Or they had an instrument in the basement or in the attic, worst places to keep an instrument. That belonged to their father, grandfather, or belonged to them, and they said there was nothing to do, and now would be a good time to get into this. So I did lots of repairs, and then some people wanted custom instruments and stuff. So that's why it was a good year for me.
Yeah.
I'm lucky.
Yeah.
I didn't let anyone in during the lockdown. I met them outside, and I would talk to them through the window, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
But I did what I had to do to survive.
Yeah, it was a bizarre time for everyone. Yeah.
And let me gossip a little bit. I had this nosy neighbor. She and she saw my mom. I saw your son going to the shop. Is he supposed to be doing that?
Oh my God. Okay.
I mean, I'm in the shop alone. You know what I mean? So anyway, do you have any questions about the process or?
Well, it's the kind of thing where had I not had music like as a composer and player, it's the kind of thing where I think I could have done well making instruments because I'm very patient and I'm really into detail. So and of course I love music, so I think I could have gone that way. But if I start asking you questions, it's sort of like recording engineers. Like I don't have the head for that either, although it's an important part of what I do. If you start in there, it's a whole lifetime.
About the patience aspect, which I have. I mean, you must have to do this work. It's funny, I'm trying to transfer some of that patience that I have for this work to other sectors in life. You know what I mean? Like dealing with people and people's stuff and.
I'm good at that, John. I have tremendous patience.
Yeah, well,
I'm lucky that way.
Your musical personality matches your actual personality.
Oh, okay.
We've gotten to talk over the years, and I always enjoy your talks. I have a bit of a rough South Bronx pessimistic optimism.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Yes, I understand.
I'm not totally pessimistic. No, actually, I love life. I understand I have a good life. Life is amazing. I never know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Right.
But you're more overall positive, and I enjoy our talks because it's like you'll just drop something off, and we'll have a 5-minute talk. I'm like, that was a great talk. So that was partly why I wanted to bring you here also, because I know that we would have an interesting conversation here, and people would get to sample some of that. You know, but when I think of you, your music matches your personality. Totally. It's like, it's congruent. That's the word.
Well,
You know?
thank you. Just to conclude, I know it's going to be repetitive of what I've already said. What you offer to the musical community is something that, if we don't appreciate it, we would only appreciate it if it wasn't here. And maybe people take it for granted or even take advantage of it. But I try to remain conscious. I think I have an advantage because I have many ouds, so that if one of them develops a problem, I could bring it here and say, John, take your time. I have but imagine an oud player that has his one oud that he makes his living with. We need you, and we need you to do it right and make it sound right, and I need it soon, and please, I mean, you gotta appreciate that there's somebody who's able to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, to bring it back a hair, what you said, you have many ouds. I would like to talk about that briefly. You have many great ouds, actually. Sometimes I wonder if you're just looking for a trip out of the house to take care of a little thing. Take the ride up the Palisades. I don't know how you get here. You live in Fort Lee, New Jersey. I'm in Beacon. How far is it? Like an hour and a half?
It's a little less than an hour and a half.
You like the drive, do you?
Well, first of all, I like being alone, so I have no problem with that. And the other thing is, if an oud starts to develop a little something, I like to take care of it before it becomes a bigger problem.
So you do what I tell people. It's like, they ask me, how often should I bring it? I said, well, actually, that depends. Depends on how much mileage you're putting on, how much you're playing, how you're playing. It's kind of like the dentist, though. You do want to bring it in before it becomes into a bigger thing. So you just bought an instrument that had a little bit of fret buzz. There was some wear. You don't want to keep going like that. First of all, it's going to annoy you, the buzzing sound, but the groove will get deeper and deeper.
Right.
And then it's kind of like taking care of a cavity before it turns to a root canal. That's what I tell people.
Yeah.
You do your checkups frequent.
But again, I have the luxury of, okay, let's take care of this. I have other ouds to keep me going. So take your time, no rush, that kind of thing.
Well, you have some beautiful monos, which I think I asked you once or twice, just to bring in your entire arsenal in one shot. And you brought in some nice ouds, mono, this, that, and I measured everything. And I have all the measurements on the computer even, and I've analyzed it. I have a lot of measurements from the hats and everything. I like to compare everything. Like, what is a successful recipe? Maybe you can get some answers from it, maybe you can't, but I like to have that data. And what I see a lot of consistency among Mono and his work, certain years you can see he was thinking a certain way, and then he moved away from it, and that's common, and that never ends in this type of work.
Right.
What I believed to be right a year or two ago is not what I believe to be right today.
Wonderful.
And one thing I learned most of all is that we really know nothing as a maker. Now, you can tie that into the universe and everything else. Because I've seen every rule broken. I've seen people brought an instrument in, an oud, let's say. It's about ouds, you're here today. And there's a brace underneath the damn bridge. That should mean no sound. Amazing sound. I had one guy brought in a classical guitar. I make Spanish guitars too. The top was 4 millimeter thick. That's double. More than double the thickness. I thought, no sound. Unbelievable sound. And I just said, okay, back to the drawing board. I know nothing. I think you think you know, but then you don't. So any luthier who tells you this is the way, be skeptical.
A more recent example, I think it's a more recent example of what you're talking about, like this oud that I brought you, has a thin layer of varnish on the top. Ouds don't have varnish. You would think that, but it has a beautiful sound.
It can be okay. Also, the tuning between the bowl and the top. There's a relationship. Sometimes it's tuned to fourth. If they're tuned to fourth, it'll make good resonance. If it's not tuned right, it'll clash. I can't really control the color in the sound. That I don't know how to do. But in terms of resonance, I know how to open that up. So if I make an instrument and it's not resonant enough to my liking or the player's liking, I can open that up. There are a few tricks.
Right.
The color and the sound, that's up to the gods, the God, the universe.
And is it as simple as the fact that every piece of wood is different?
Every piece of wood is completely different. Then coupled with the other woods, coupled with the specific dimensions of that instrument, the variables are so great.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
Even
actually.
the pick you use, how you hold it, how thick, the shape of the tip, which string you use, everything involved.
Some people mix 3 different sets to get the strings to get the sound they want.
Right.
Everyone always asks me which strings Simon uses. It's actually not fixed. Sometimes he changes his mind, or the instrument changes.
But
So-
I'll just say this about that. I believe you probably could give Simon a lousy oud and he'll play it and it'll sound great.
Of course.
So there's ultimately it's the player.
And I think people are worried about the wrong things. They always ask me which pick he uses, how thick the pick is, and to answer that question, he uses a very thick pick. Doesn't mean you're going to play like him or get the sound like him. It's really complex,
Sure.
Even they studied Itzhak Perlman has very wide, fat fingers, okay? Like tree trunk wide fingers. He even said that he's not comfortable playing high up on the violin where the intonations shrink, although he plays brilliantly high up, he doesn't have any issues. And then they recorded a woman, I forget her name, but she has very skinny, pointy fingers, and is a totally different type of sound, and then there's the bowing as well, So there's many variables.
Sure.
You can't really possibly calculate what the sound's going to be in the end. It's a complete mystery.
Yeah. But I think it's what I tell my students, the ultimate goal for each of us should be to discover our unique identity as musicians. So the instrument we choose, the strings we choose, the pick we choose, where we pick the instrument, at what angle, everything that we choose becomes part of the formula that is your sound.
Right.
And that
should be encouraged.
That uniqueness is what should be encouraged.
That should be encouraged, yeah.
It was encouraged in
schools,
jazz a few generations ago.
Yeah.
You have to have your own sound.
Right.
I believe this should be the goal of every musician.
Well, a lot of conservatories now, and more in the classical world, I think they damage people. I was in the New York Arabic Orchestra with Bassam Saba, may he rest in peace, and there was one Egyptian violinist, young lady, very talented, Western classically trained, studying Arabic music with Bassam. Her musical aptitude was such that she was soaking up the Arabic, which was already in her roots. She grew up in Egypt. And her teacher, and I'm going to mention the institution, it doesn't matter, when she told her great virtuoso teacher that she's studying Arabic music and the microtonality, he said it's going to ruin your intonation. No, stupid. Her intonation is going to be better than yours, and she's going to have a better understanding of intonation. Yeah. How narrow-minded, and I think that's arrogant, in my opinion, that you know better. You don't even know what those notes are. You're going to think they're out of tune. E half flat is not out of tune. It's its own note, and if you play a particular piece and you change that to E flat instead of E half flat, or you play E natural, the piece, either the characters completely change or the piece doesn't even work. It's like comedians when they tell a joke. If you say something like this, it has a different outcome. They learn, I played in all these clubs and I couldn't get the joke to work. But then when I just said it that way, I got laughs.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Sure.
That note is its own, not own value, but if you play a melody in a certain way with that note, and you change that note to flat or to natural, it can either ruin the piece or it just changes the nature of it.
Well, what you're saying is, if you develop the technique to be able to accurately control microtones as you're playing, then you're just that much more of a sophisticated musician.
You're enriched.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Not to mention the fact that microtones are actually more in tune with the earth.
Yep.
This just or exact intonation, well-tempered clavier is not natural, doesn't exist in nature.
Very clinical, right.
It doesn't exist. Pythagoras discovered the harmonic series where that third is a little flat, like Rast, This is in nature, if you believe in God or nature, whatever word you want to use. So, as of Bach's time, we've kind of accepted something that is unnatural as being correct intonation, but we don't have to talk about that.
You stumbled across something very important, a couple things. One, the harmonic series, which is actually a part of the open string, or any note. When you play a note, this is a C, it's not in tune. There's a series of other notes in there. Actually, the more there are, the better the sound.
Exactly.
And I think about this as a maker. I don't want to impede. I want to complete the harmonic series. You know, you can make an oud where it'll clash. Also, you play a note, and you ever hear play a note and it gets canceled out?
Yeah.
It gets swallowed.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't ring properly.
Right.
So harmonic series also applies to my work as a luthier as well.
Right.
You know?
Right.
There was something else I wanted to talk about. What's this here? Get that out. Alright, we're still recording.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
This is going to be one of your edits.
That was but no, actually, I'll talk about it. That was my son. He's has a habit of, he's 1 year old now. Well, he'll be in 2 weeks. And already he's heckled me. I did a gig with the Puerto Rican band, and I'm talking to the people, and I'm explaining the form, and I hear, blah, 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 blah. This next piece is called Capuito de Aleli. It's a very... You don't like it? He's a heckler. I can handle hecklers. I will hold it straight. I said, I have a heckler out there, you know.
He's talking to you. I love it.
We spoke earlier because he was here before they left, before we started recording, and I told you he's starting to bang on things, pots and pans. He's banging on the face of the oud, and you told me that's even how you started.
Yeah, I mean, I was banging on the table, and thank God my parents got me a little bongo. And then I got a darabuka, and that's it. Then just...
That's actually, you started playing in your dad's band, percussion?
Yeah, I was the darabuka player.
Wow.
I was 5 years old. I played at the New York World's Fair in front of 50,000 people, and didn't understand at the time that this is something really unique.
Well, I'm going to tell you something really funny, because I want my son to be a string player. Right?
I'm gonna interrupt you, and I'm gonna tell. This is none of my business, but I'm just gonna blurt it out anyway. Your son is who he is.
Yeah.
He's gonna tell you and show you who he is.
Yeah, but of course, I still, as a father,
Yeah. You're hoping.
And I told you earlier, I wouldn't force him into anything.
Yeah.
But so he's banging on things. So I'm like, well, maybe he's gonna be a percussionist. I don't want my son to be a percussionist. You know, I guess that's better than nothing. But then it gives me hope, because you tell me, well, I know everyone knows who you are. You're the oud player, started banging in pots and pans. And Marcel Khalife from Lebanon also talked about he started banging on pots and pans.
All do.
And I have definitely noticed my son banging on the table. Yeah. Also, when I tap out rhythms all the time, when I'm just sitting there doing things, and he takes note. And
he's into the music.
He starts dancing.
So get him a little drum.
Yeah.
Have a keyboard, a little keyboard in the house.
We have that already.
Have a guitar. Just have the things around.
Yeah.
And then he's going to have it available, and then he's going to show you what he wants.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, for now we're good. We can always talk more if we have more topics.
I'm always at your disposal, John.
One thing, thank you.
As you're at my disposal.
I was going to ask you, what's your ideal instrument? But you said it earlier. You said when... the action is such and the sound is such, and I said when it plays itself. So you kind of answered that question.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I go through phases. Again, I'm kind of rich with good ouds, but I go through phases where one of them is kind of talking to me, and I use that one for a few months, on gigs.
You forgot about that one, or did it gain you character?
No, I'm just saying different ouds at different times, and then I'll go to another one, and that'll inspire me, and I'll play that one for a few months, and that's kind of how it is for me,
Like you have your oud here. Sometimes you have your second string matches the fifth string. That's not how I tune, and
right.
And so I was just tuning your oud, and I was like playing, and I enjoyed it. That tuning was different from my tuning, and what it did was it opened up my musical vocabulary in a different way, and I started playing different phrasing. I lost the other thing, but I gained some other stuff.
Can I tell you why I tune that way? There's a sonic reason. Can I demonstrate?
Yeah, you have a oud right there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, first of all, it's the old way of tuning, but that's not why I do it. For me, sound, tone is more important than anything. so that I want to play a note and have a listener go, oh, that's a beautiful instrument. Not he's a great player, but oh, that's a beautiful sound.
So you want to maximize
Yes.
the fullness of the instrument.
Yes, and as a result, I tried tuning the newer ways where these bass strings are tuned differently, and I noticed that my oud is not vibrating. I lost some tone.
Yeah.
And it's obvious when I play a D here. Now, if I muffle all the strings except the bass note, that bass note is vibrating and I can hear it.
Yeah.
Same thing with the G. And so the oud is constantly vibrating and giving me a more complex tone, and I only appreciated it even more when I tuned the more modern way and lost that.
Now, I'll tell you a funny story. Simone, a lot of times when he's playing, he also jump on violin, and his brother Najib often would be behind him in the older days, and he always tell Najib, whenever we switch to we're playing stuff in D, tune that low string to D.
Right.
And if Simone's on violin, he's in the front, he's not even looking back, but after the first set or after the performance is over, he would say to Najib, I know you didn't tune to D, I heard it.
You see? Exactly.
And he's listening to everything, and
Yes.
you can tell these nuances.
Yes, exactly.
It does, if you're in D and you're playing that third string, the D, and you have that lowest string tuned to D, it definitely rings better, it's more full, it gets more support in a sense,
Right,
It's
exactly.
more rich. One thing quickly I want to talk about, you have a very interesting attack on the oud that's very different from anyone I know. Most of the people I know, you have you utilize upstroke a lot with the rishi.
I
Right.
was absolutely not conscious or aware of that until students or admirers started telling me that, and I didn't know what they were talking about. So they would say, "Oh, look at that YouTube clip. You're doing these upstrokes where it's not necessary. It's so you chose to."
Yes.
And again, I was not conscious of it. And for me, the brain can be a great enemy of music. When you're conscious of what you're doing,
Or clinical.
it's as if you are more important than the music. My goal is to be an observer of the music, have it come from a greater power. I don't know how to describe it, but my best musical moments are when I'm just observing, and it's not about me. It's about the music or the instrument or the moment or the environment, and I'm a part of that. So I wasn't aware of it until my students or whatever pointed it out, and now I am aware of it, but immediately I try to just forget it and just play whatever comes natural.
Can you give me an example of some of that upstroke technique? And anything, it could be melody or takasim,
I don't know.
It's a very beautiful touch. It's very unique. It's very you. I haven't heard many people do that, but it really has a beautiful ring to it.
I feel a little more in control when I do it.
I started doing it a little bit more myself,
Yeah.
just to get that effect more.
Okay.
It's interesting. I think sometimes Marcel does it. I've noticed Marcel Khalife do it. But in general, we're taught to do a lot of down because it's strong, and as the oud it's pronounced.
But
it
you,
is,
you
has
just said a
limit.
very important word, taught.
Yeah.
When you're not taught, John, I cross my legs when I play. This is wrong. I hold the pick wrong. This is wrong. I do upstrokes. This is wrong. Everything I do is
But
not
it's
by
you.
the book because I don't read the book.
Right.
I don't.
I think it's okay to learn some level of discipline in the beginning and then unlearn it and then be yourself. But you need, I think, go back, we do need a tradition.
Well, my
a base.
teachers were the old records. As you know, I'm a fanatical collector of
I saw you had some collection.
6,000 Armenian and Turkish 78s.
Wow.
100 years old. 6,000.
Wow.
Which is, by the way, we're in negotiation now. It's the whole collection is going to the Library of Congress.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of all serious.
Oh, wow.
Those are my teachers, but obviously it wasn't visual. I would listen and try to imagine, how is he doing that? And so I tried to do it. Obviously, physically all wrong, but I found my own thing eventually.
You mean to tell me you didn't have YouTube where you can slow it down without changing the pitch?
Yeah, there was no YouTube.
No
back then.
university
Yeah.
YouTube, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, Ara, that was a beautiful talk. Maybe in the future we'll wrap a little bit more.
Anytime,
But,
John.
I appreciate our visits, and I wanted to capture that in this. And maybe we'll do it again in the future. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Continued good luck. Thanks.
Thank you.